Welcome to Hacking Your ADHD. I'm your host, William Kerb, and I have ADHD. On this podcast, I dig into the tools, tactics, and best practices to help you work with your ADHD brain. Hey team, it's that time of year again where I feel like I need a kick in the pants. My kids are back in school and it feels like I have this glut of time available. It feels like I should be knocking things off my to-do list left and right, but I'm not. I'm tired and I'm not getting things done. And it's frustrating because it feels like now that I have this time, I'm wasting it. It feels like that if I take this time for rest, that I'm going to look back later and regret that I didn't push myself harder. But rest is important, even when it feels like I don't have time for it. And rest can feel like this foreign concept when your brain's always on the go. It can feel like trying to sit down on a treadmill that's still running. In this episode, we're going to explore why our ADHD brains can find rest so uncomfortable, and how we can use pacing to finally make it part of our day. We're going to try to explore why our brains resist rest so much, and how we can try and work in those much-needed breaks without feeling so guilty. If you'd like to follow along on the show notes page, you can find that at hackingYourADHD.com/194. This episode is also brought to you by Sunsama. As someone who's always trying to stay on top of my day, I found that Sunsama makes a huge difference in how I manage my workload. It's more than just a to-do list. It's like having a personal assistant that helps me plan my day in a way that's actually sustainable. And that last piece is what's so crucial for me because it's so easy for me to overschedule. When I'm planning with Sunsama each morning, it prompts me to make sure I'm focused on tasks that matter the most and even alerts me when I'm overloading myself with too much work. I think my favorite part of Sunsama is its integration with my calendar, because while it's great to plan my day with a to-do list, it isn't nearly as valuable if I'm not doing it with my calendar. And I love the fact that it has a built-in feature called the shutdown ritual, because it's so important for me that I'm making sure that I'm keeping my work-life balance in mind when I'm doing that planning in the morning. Give Sunsama a try today. It's free to start, and you don't even need to enter a credit card to get going. Just head over to sunsama.com/a/hacking-your-ADHD and see how it can help build a more productive and balanced workday for you. That's sunsama.com/a/hacking-your-ADHD. Check it out. Or you can just click the link in the show notes. All right, keep on listening to find out how to get some much-needed rest in your day. Let's start by discussing why taking time for rest can be such a challenge with ADHD. I hit some of the bigger themes in the introduction, but I feel like it's still worth exploring a bit deeper. The first thing we've got to remember is how our brain craves stimulation. This can be an issue when we're trying to slow down and recharge, because many of those activities that we think that are going to get us the best rest aren't particularly stimulating. Often we're running what feels like an endless loop of hyperactivity and mental restlessness. So when we do try to get that rest in, those thoughts are just amplified. When we're in this cycle of constant stimulation, doing nothing can feel very uncomfortable. If I'm trying to lay down for a nap, I'll often be unable to just lay there and let myself get into rest mode. This can be both physical and mental, as I'm oscillating between the need to find a more comfortable position and getting out those jitters, and being unable to slow down my brain enough, and I end up with a feeling that I just want to get out of bed. Another piece of this can come from the all-or-nothing thinking that we're not being productive, that we're just wasting our time, and that we don't have time for rest. Instead of giving myself permission to rest, I'll push myself harder, even when I'm mentally and physically drained. And of course, we're also often dealing with executive dysfunction. With ADHD, planning and prioritizing can be incredibly difficult, and that includes making sure that we include rest in our priorities and plans. Not to mention the fact that when we have that brain fog going on, it means that my executive function is even worse than usual. Now, to be sure, these are very real issues, but it can feel like we're making mountains out of molehills here. I mean, why can't I just push through? It can feel incredibly hard to prioritize rest when I have other things that need to happen. Even while working on this piece, I found myself fighting between trying to keep working and dealing with the fact that I've been exhausted all week. As I mentioned, my first reaction is that I should just push through, that despite the fact that I may not have gotten the best sleep, it's just that I have so many things on my plate, and so I can't take that time to rest. I need to get stuff done. But that attitude is precisely why I'm feeling this way. It's because I'm already pushing myself too hard. Gah, even writing this, I hate it. I don't want to have to take the breaks. I want to get stuff done. Okay, deep breath. With the understanding that the frenetic pace I'm trying to maintain isn't working, I can look at my pacing. Specifically, how I can tweak what I'm already doing to work at a more sustainable pace. It's about being intentional with my work and building in those breaks to create a better balance between my actions and my recovery. My current pacing doesn't take that recovery piece into consideration. I was recently working on planning out my day, and the immediate red flag that popped up was the fact that I had no white space on my calendar. In my glorious wisdom, I believed that I would go from task to task with no transitions, no need for breaks, and no time that I would ever get distracted. Not that great of a plan, but I was loath to take anything off. I was sure that I'd find the time. I mean, I'm not exactly sure where I thought I'd find that time. Well, I do know. Again, in my infinite wisdom, the idea was that I could take breaks when I was extra efficient and finished my tasks early. And again, this is not a great plan. The worst part was I knew going in that I should adjust things, but alas, I thought, well, maybe this time I'd not only exceed my expectations, but in fact, I would have solved ADHD. Side note here, I did not in fact solve ADHD. Alright, back to pacing and how we can work on building that into our schedules. As I mentioned, my schedule is missing white space. Time when I'm not scheduled to do anything. This can be hard to leave in our calendars. It can feel like this is just going to end up as wasted time. It's not. It's there for transitions, for when we need to take a break, and for when stuff comes up. We don't want to be fully planning out our days and having to rearrange that schedule every time something comes up. And always something comes up. By building in that white space and pacing out our day, we can build in our work period and schedule our breaks. I also want to quickly step back here and mention that white space isn't only the time that we should be taking our breaks. That's just for when we need a bit of extra time. We should also schedule time specifically for breaks. So pacing can also help challenge our all-or-nothing thinking about how we're using our time. Now, I'm not going to say that once we start scheduling more break time into our day that we're going to just automatically stop feeling guilty about taking breaks, but it does help. It helps to know that I'm not slacking off or being lazy. Instead, I'm following my plan. I mean, those things are a whole other can of worms anyways, but this here does help reframe the idea that my rest time is just as important as my working time. And this isn't just about adding white space into our calendars that will help this process. We can also use tools like timers and planners and other productivity apps to help ease off some of the burden to our executive function. Using a tool like the Pomodoro method, where you work for something like 20 minutes and then take a 5-minute break, can be a great way to enforce taking those breaks. Although honestly from experience and what I've heard from others is that they tend to get more out of the method if they go with a more extended work period and breaks for something more along the lines of 45 minutes of focused work and then a 15-minute break. So don't be afraid to experiment with those timeframes to see what works for you. Regardless of how we're getting ourselves to take those breaks and rest, we still need to address the fact that often these breaks don't feel refreshing. Those naps I try and take where I'm up 5 minutes later because I can't get myself to relax don't feel like they're doing much to help me feel any more rested. And I'd say the biggest part of the problem is that often I'm not doing something stimulating enough to keep me engaged in the activity, even if that activity is just supposed to be me resting. So we're going to do two things here. First, we're going to work on coming up with a list of activities that we find restful, and then we're going to work on jazzing them up so that we can give ourselves the stimulations we need without going overboard. Let's take the example of napping. While I love the idea of just lying down and drifting off, that typically doesn't happen for me. Even when I'm dead tired during the day, I struggle to actually take a nap. But what can help is having something like an audiobook to listen to while I'm laying down. Now, an important thing to understand about napping is that you can still get many of the benefits of a nap without sleeping. The important part is letting yourself lie still with your eyes closed and letting your brain rest. This is also why when I'm laying down without that small stimulation, I'm not getting the rest I want. My brain isn't going into low power mode, it's going into overdrive. So this low level of stimulation allows me to relax better than if I didn't have it. So I do need to have something like an audiobook or maybe a guided meditation to help me relax when I'm laying down. Another option here could be just listening to music or a sleep podcast. But let's also come up with some ideas for some other restful activities, because it can be hard to come up with ideas at the moment, especially if you're tired and dealing with brain fog. So it can be incredibly beneficial to have that list already prepared ahead of time so that you can peruse it when you need it and go, oh yeah, it would feel nice to take a bath or doing some reading. Our list here can include things like watching TV, listening to music, doing a puzzle, talking with a friend, doodling, reading, or maybe even something like a short walk or some stretching. It isn't only about sleeping and doing nothing. It's about doing those things that will help recharge you. It's about giving yourself permission to pause, reset, and not be productive. although we could argue that rest is its own kind of productivity as well. And to help round out our list above, we can also include meditation, yoga, breathing exercises, listening to podcasts, having a snack, taking a bath, having some coffee or tea, playing with your pets, journaling, visualization. Really anything that makes you feel better after having gone through the practice. While it can be difficult to build in time for rest, be it because of restlessness, difficulty with transitions, all-or-nothing thinking, or executive function challenges, it is still important that we don't just try and sweep the idea away. By pacing out your day, you can balance activity and rest, smoothing out those transitions and making rest feel like a natural part of your routine. It's important to remember that productivity itself is not a virtue. And I'm not trying to say that productivity is bad, it's just not something that we need to put on a pedestal and make the end-all be-all of how we're valuing ourselves. You are more than what you produce, and so it's important to give yourself the grace to take some time to rest. Thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end. Before you go though, let's do a quick rundown of today's top tips. 1. It's important to recognize that rest can feel uncomfortable because we aren't getting enough stimulation in our restful activities. To solve for this, we can seek ways to add low levels of stimulation so that we can better recover during our relaxation time. 2. We need to build white space into our calendars and schedule intentional downtime in our day to allow for rest, transitions, and unexpected events. 3. Coming up with ideas in the moment can be hard, so prepare go-to lists of activities like reading, stretching, or listening to podcasts to help you relax when you need. 4. If we can shift our mindset into seeing rest as part of our productivity routine, it can help us reframe it into something that will better help us recharge and avoid burnout without the guilt. That's it. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear what you thought of this episode. Feel free to connect with me over at hackingyyouradhd.com/contact. If you'd like links or to read this episode's transcript, you can go to the show notes page at hackingyyouradhd.com/194. And now for your moment of dad. Why do seagulls fly over the sea? Because if they flew over the bay, they'd be a bagel.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's LIBSYN, ads.com today.